I had a lot of fun making this review. For one, I just had a lot of fun playing the game over again because I'd rented this a long time ago, and when I was thinking of reviews to make, this one immediately leapt to mind because it was just so cracktastic and awesome. And I have played basically every X-Files game there is, and this one was actually pretty good as far as movie license games go. But they did a lot of things right for Resist or Serve, things that they screwed up a lot in the original X-Files game. The PC one, I think it was on the original PlayStation as well. The one with the 7 CD-ROMs, the one you're looking at right now. That one actually did not have the original cast members in it. They were there for a very few minutes, and you got to play as them for a very brief time, but actually your character in that game was assigned to go look for Mulder and Scully, who had gone missing on an assignment. So most of the time, they were nowhere to be seen, and I guess it was just the fact that you kind of felt robbed that you weren't really getting the X-Files experience. Not really. Because without Mulder and Scully, it kind of loses a lot of the heart and soul of it. In this game, it actually had a lot of the original cast members. Like, you had Skinner, you had Mulder and Scully, you even had the lone gunman. So, in that regard, this was actually one of the more immersive and realistic movie license experiences out there. And besides that, I think they did the right thing in making this a survival horror game in the same vein as Resident Evil. The control is pretty good. It's far too dark, and that's a common problem in horror games where it has to be dark, otherwise it's not really that scary. But at the same time, it's also really hard to see a lot without cranking the gamma up. You can have a flashlight, but the graphics really aren't good enough to handle flashlights that well. And the acting is also, at times, very uninspired, but I think that actually adds a lot of charm to it. The worst part of the cutscenes you're looking at right here, where they basically have not blocked the cutscenes at all. So it looks really cheap. Also, I don't think they ever really handled zombie invasion in the X-Files, which I thought was kind of one of the more logical things that the X-Files could handle. I'm sure I'm going to get corrected, but they never really had, a Dawn of the Dead plot for the X-Files. I guess because had that actually happened, that would have really made things weird between Mulder and Scully, because they'd have, that would be one of the greatest proofs of paranormal experiences ever, having the dead rise from the grave. But I thought this was actually a very good idea. And to a degree, it's been pulled off. I was really fascinated with the extras, because actually I really don't think you saw extras on games all that much up to this point. Certainly not up to this point. So the very notion that there were behind the scenes, like blooper reels and watching scenes of them do the voice acting, was actually pretty interesting to me. It was embarrassing to watch them kind of go through stuff like this, but actually the guy who played Krychek was really busting his ass here. I was impressed. I also made a big deal of the lipstick, and I wasn't really making a big deal out of it. I was making fun of it. But from what I've been told, the reason that you do this is to basically act as a lip balm, and to keep your lips from drying out, keep you from licking your lips and making that sound on the microphone. Once again, this shows my ignorance of the business. But it's probably something I should be doing, but I don't think you'll be seeing any clips of me putting on lipstick before I do voiceovers for any of this stuff. I got fan mail from a lot of ladies who thought this was very sexy, and they were disappointed that I did not, in fact, do the full Silence of the Lambs Monty, which was very disturbing. I blocked those people from my email list from then on, but the plot for this actually makes absolutely no sense. And I go into describing how complex this plot is. And it was really needlessly overcomplicated. I think they did it mainly to involve the government, the alien conspiracy, the black oil, voodoo magic. So it was just really a clusterfuck of all these different, varied ideas, when all they really had to do was just say something like, oh, there's Wiccans who are raising the dead, or there's some kind of government conspiracy into raising the dead. But they had to go with alien human hybrids, black oil, magic, aliens, all this stuff going over and over. And it just didn't make any sense. The bosses were actually really needlessly overcomplicated, too, because this was my favorite, actually, because you had to drop a car on this guy. And he was entirely invulnerable, which I just didn't buy because I had some pretty good weapons at this point, but the only way you could stop him was to drop a car. And there was no way to just leave. My first instinct when I met that guy was just to run out the door and lock it behind me, but you can't. So you were kind of forced to fight this guy who was rolling around on that little cart that lets you roll under the car. I just thought that was funny. I was like, that's a boss character, a guy who is technically far less capable of fighting you than a guy with 2 legs. One of the most popular moments in any of my videos right here is me playing with dolls. And actually, I probably beat this gag to death in later videos. This was a gimmick that didn't have a lot of legs, but people loved watching this. And I was just, you know what, I just said this was boring, and I said this would be funny, and I realized I had a lot of really random dolls scattered around. You know, me and my brother had some dolls. Like, we didn't actually collect action figures, but over the course of time, we collect swag. Like, somebody had given me a gift of a Morpheus and Neo doll at some point. I had bought the version of Bioshock that gave me a Big Daddy. My brother Miles is a big fan of comics, so he has a statue of Golden Age Superman, he has a Green Lantern, and a friend of his got him a statue of Dizzy Gillespie. I think it was in Louisiana, and he got it for him as a gift. And so that's where Giant Dizzy Gillespie comes from. I have no idea where he got it, but it was a gift from a friend. And actually, I kind of phased out Giant Dizzy Gillespie except for very brief cameos because after one of the times I filmed the videos, I noticed that Dizzy Gillespie actually had a hole in him under his arm, and I have no idea where it came from, and I don't think I did it, but I might have. So Giant Dizzy Gillespie is actually very fragile, and I try not to mess with him too much because I'm afraid I'll damage him further. So unless I can find another Giant Dizzy Gillespie, I really don't think you'll be seeing that much of him. But man, I got so much mail saying that was where they got hooked, was watching a grown man play with dolls. And that was actually a bit I was not happy with, and it's kind of funny that it's usually the bits that I don't like too much that gain the biggest fans. Like, people say they love them, like, I can't think... Playing with the dolls. There was a moment in the Phantasmagoria review where I talked to Batman, and he's like, you're not Batman. He's like, R2 times a million. And people loved it. And I was actually planning on re-recording that bit because I thought I could have come up with something funnier. But people said, don't change that. That's awesome. We love that Batman thing. And so I can't really predict what people will find funny. But I knew people would find this funny, because at the second half of this game starts getting really cracktastic, and that Mulder starts tripping out like crazy, and so he starts seeing things that aren't really there. Like, he starts seeing the alien bounty hunter. He starts seeing Skinner as a Nazi, and his secretary starts chasing her on the table with an AK-47, and she's got a hunchback. She's got a hump on her back. So you actually have to kill your Nazi boss. This song, for those of you who don't know, these are kind of unfair inside jokes. There's a website called You're the Man Now Dog, or YTMND, which kind of takes these really funny quotes out of movies that are out of context, and they just kind of repeat them endlessly. And the joke comes from Sean Connery's line in the movie Finding Forrester, where he says, yes, you're the man now, dog. And it was just, listening to that Scotsman say, you're the man now, dog, it just kind of got a cult following. It's just kind of one of those quotes, like, game over, Whitley, that struck people as really, really funny. And it endured on the internet as a really funny joke. So, a lot of jokes like that kind of cropped up as being really, really funny. So, things like the Nazi song, there'd be like, secret Nazi, and then they'd play that song. Another joke that kind of went over a lot of people's heads was, I said, Zombie Armake 21. Armake 21 is another game critic online, on YouTube mainly. And he's the guy I kind of modeled myself after quite a bit in the early days, because I really liked his stuff. And he kind of had a distinctive look, because he's a young guy. probably younger than me, and he's completely bald. I think he started losing his hair at a young age. But he was really funny, and he kind of had a much more off-the-cuff style than I do. Or at least it seemed that way. He has a very natural style, and that he seems like whatever he's saying is coming right off the top of his head, but he's never searching for words. So he's actually very extemporaneously funny. And I really like that about him, and he has a lot of very funny reviews. Unfortunately, a lot of his stuff got taken down off YouTube, and you can't really find it anymore. And I don't think he really liked doing the game reviews, because I think the fans started getting really demanding of him, and he didn't like being pressured. So I liked Armake, and I thought this was kind of my shout-out to him, because I got much respect for the guy. Turns out the guy does not like me all that much. We got into a kind of a falling out, and I'm not really sure why. There was a lot of misunderstanding, but that was my shout-out to him. So if you can find some of his stuff, check it out.